Is Kurt coming?
I do have two people on the WebEx with phone numbers. I've got a ending in, it's a 715 ending in a 24. And then,
It's Stacy Morash as a guest.
okay, and then 715 ending in a 95. Oh, and Supervisor Gibbs is on now as well.
All right, we'll call the meeting of the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee to order. We have a quorum. Does anybody wish to make a public comment? Anybody wish to make a public comment? Anybody wish to make a public comment? If not, we will move on to the approval of the minutes from the October 26th meeting. What are your wishes? They were in the packet. Moved by
McEwen
McEwen.
approved.
Second by Fisher. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the minutes will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. What are your wishes, or excuse me, get my red agenda out here. It wasn't the October meeting, it was the November 23rd meeting. Yeah, I just grabbed the wrong agenda. That's all right. We have no budget transfers. We will then deal with the DA's invoices. Kristen, do you want to give us an update on where we are with those?
Yeah, this is just an FYI. They had just received these two invoices from 2019, and Nancy Solberg and I are investigating it. We have not looked like we have paid.
Vince, can you hear me?
We can.
We are investigating. It doesn't look like they got them, and at this point, the state of Wisconsin started emailing invoices, so we aren't sure where the originals went. We are letting you know because we do have money. If they are still needed to be paid, we do have money in 2021, and we would bring them back to you in January so we can get that taken care of. But we just want to give you a heads up that we're looking at it, and we'll let you know at your January meeting if they are truly still things that we have to take care of or not. So that it's really a FYI at this point.
So there's two months or 3 months worth
It's the amount that we pay for a portion of state DAs in the past. And so we're following up and taking a look at it. But she just got them, and I said, well, we'll put them on so that we can just figure it out and take care of it before we get too far into 2022. So we will update you in January.
All right, we're going to go back, so that'll come back to us in January. Go back to item 5A1, which is the approval of the claims and question costs. Those were sent out late last week. Does anybody have any questions or motions relative to the claims and question costs? If not, a motion to approve would be in order. Moved by Leahy.
Second by Fisher.
Second by Fisher. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That carries. Tax deed properties. Kim?
Agenda is 234495 Fire Station Road, and I have 3 bids to open for that property, and I will open them in the order in which they were received. The set value on this property was $16,000. So the first bid I received is in the amount of $21,550. And that is accompanied by a 10% payment.
Lance, can you hear me?
We can, Kurt, I think we can hear you, yes. Can you hear us?
The second bid I received is in the amount of $21,622, and that is also accompanied by a 10% check. The third bid is in the amount of $28,000, and that is accompanied by a 10% check. And I should have read the names with each bid that I failed to do. The first bid in the amount of $21,550 is in the name of James A. Fleece. The second bid is in the name of Michael Witzeling. And the third bid is in the name of Jeffrey S. Borse.
Any questions from the committee? Mike?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to note the third bid from Mr. Borse. It just wanted to note for the committee, he is the original owner of this property. So I think the committee can, when it's making its determination of which bid is in the county's best interest, consider that as a factor, although there is no preference to prior owners at this point in the process. That is something the committee could consider, specifically given that there were back taxes and a period of time where a lease was not in place on the property as well.
He is still the highest bidder. What were our total outstanding taxes on that? It was hard to tell because we took it and it looks like there were 3 years of taxes when we had ownership.
Right, the property was taken back in 2012, 2013. At the time the property was taken, the 3 years of outstanding taxes were $5,963.27.
Was this a homestead? Not, okay. Any questions from the committee? If not, what are your wishes?
John, this is Craig.
Go ahead, Craig.
I'll make a motion to accept the bid for the 28,000.
All right,
I'll second.
been moved by McEwen, second by Arstead, to accept the bid of $28,000 from Jeffrey Borse for the property at 234495 Fire Station Road in the town of Wausau. Any discussion? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? That motion carries. John?
Chair Robinson, just a quick question, and I'm sorry to bounce back. But in regards to the DA invoicing, I did notice that these bills were dated January and February of 2019. Is this, they were kind of just lost in the system at that point?
Nancy just got them, but at this point is apparently when the state of Wisconsin started emailing bills to people. So we don't know where they went at the first round, if they went to us, if they were emailed to somebody, if they bounced back.
Okay, so they were just kind of, they went into the ether at that
Yeah.
point. Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do have another bid that I received for an
Okay.
old property.
All right.
This is sale number 2019-3.
Is this the 16th Avenue property?
Yes.
And this property was listed at $1,900. We have a bid in the amount of $405, accompanied by 10% check. This is the same one that was submitted probably 3-4 months ago as well.
John, this is Craig.
Go ahead, Craig.
Thank you. This isn't on the agenda, is it?
Well, we've got that catch-all with tax deed properties.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we weren't going to have a problem because it wasn't listed, but not a problem. Thank you.
The tax deed properties is a catch-all, so if we receive bids from people relative to any outstanding or any property that we've put up for sale, we accept them. So what do we have
Okay,
in
thank you.
outstanding taxes on this one?
When the property was taken back in the late 2000s, around 2009, $3,600 was the outstanding tax bill at that time.
Has there been any other interest in this property?
We had received a bid maybe 3-4 months ago. Someone submitted a bid for $1,000 that was rejected at the time. That is the only other interest we've had along the way.
Any questions?
Is that it's been re-advertised?
I'm sorry?
John, is that property been re-advertised? And that's how we received the bid now of 400?
No, it's just been posted on the website since 2019. It has not been re-advertised.
Jonathan?
John, this,
I guess just my question would be, in regards to our rules, obviously with a bid less than the appraised value, I know historically we had passed on those, but for a property of this nature in time frame, my kind of outstanding question would be, is there just the plain utility of getting it back on the tax rolls rather than it just sitting and sitting and sitting?
That's I think the discretion is up to this body in the context of that, but we rejected a bid of $1,000, and now we're at 40% of that.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Go ahead, Yi.
I was going to make a motion to reject the offer.
All right, we have a motion to reject the offer. Is there a second? Seconded by Leahy. Moved by Zhang, seconded by Leahy to reject the offer. Kim, under the discussion, is this something we could advertise again? There seems to be some interest in it.
We could advertise it again, and then the adjacent parcel was also recently given back to the county by Habitat for Humanity.
Okay.
So conceivably, we could advertise the two parcels together. I don't know if that would make any difference in interest in that property or not. We have also not gotten an
Chairman,
appraisal on this property. The price is based on the assessment when it was advertised back in early 2019.
Our problem is that we pay other units of government in back taxes every year. And so while the back taxes were $3,600, the majority of those taxes represent not a loss in income, but an outflow for the county in reimbursing the school district, the city, the technical college, and at that time, did we pay the forestry tax at that time? Way back when?
I would have to go back and investigate that. I'm not sure.
But nonetheless, we are out significantly more money than $400. And so the motion before us is to reject. Any discussion on
Mr.
the,
Chairman?
go ahead.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we should have is we should set a precedent, or not precedent, but a policy that, in this case, because the property and the adjacent property now has come back into the county's ownership, I think that a actual, advertisement campaign to solicit bids on it, rather than just accepting bids as they come in, might be a better approach, especially since the real estate market is where it's at. I don't know if this parcel is a buildable parcel, but if that in conjunction with the neighboring parcel creates a buildable parcel, that parcel, those two parcels together might sell, or there might be more interest in it. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. So Kim, could you bundle those as a, Michael, can we bundle those as a potential package, or collectively or individually? Or should we quit claim deed one parcel to the other to create a?
I understand your question, and I don't think I have an answer that is the right one at this time. I think I would want to look into that a little bit, but I could see the advantages of bundling them if that's something that we can do. I just want to make sure that we're on the right footing when we do that.
So can we leave it at pending the review by Corporation Council? We will advertise those two properties together, whether separately or collectively.
That sounds appropriate to me.
Is that a consensus of Yi? Is that okay, Yi, Craig, Kurt,
Yes.
and Jennifer? Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right,
So then would you like me to get an appraisal done on those properties, or are we going to stick with the assessed value?
I think consistent with our past practice, we would like an appraisal on those. And it would be interesting if can he appraise, collect, them together versus,
I can ask him, certainly.
that would be of interest to us. All right. All right. We have a process to move ahead. Next item is resolution on the acceptance of the opioid settlement. Are you or Michael? Michael, you're, or Kurt. Who wants to be on first?
I can get us started, Mr. Chair. This resolution that's before the committee today would authorize the county to enter into settlement agreements. So a little bit of background here. The county previously engaged Von Briesen and Roper, along with some other law firms, to pursue litigation against opioid manufacturers. That litigation's been ongoing for several years. There is a proposed settlement on the table at this time, and that settlement would require each unit of local government to approve the settlement agreement. So the proposed resolution, what it does is it has the county board authorizing execution of certain memorandums of understanding. One would, and they're both actually draft versions are in your packet. Those memorandums would outline how the funds are distributed between the different local government entities and between the local governments and the state. And they would also authorize the settlement agreement with the opioid defendants in these cases. They would also allow for an escrow agreement to be put into place to make sure that the settlement funds are allocated appropriately. So this is a required step in the process. My understanding is that early January is the deadline for these resolutions to be passed by local governments. So I did have a chance to review the resolution. I made some very small updates and corrections to it. And I also reviewed the memorandums that accompany it, and they seem to be legally sound and appropriate. They also were obviously drafted by counsel that we've retained for that purpose.
Can you explain how the legal fees, I read through those and was somewhat confused.
I can.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Okay, so what the original agreement that we signed when we entered into a contract with the law firm of Von Brayson and Roper and the other law firm to pursue on Marathon County's behalf litigation, we agreed that we would pay to the law firm, the combined law firm, 25% of anything that we receive in funds. Now, what they have is they have a national fund that has been set aside by the court system to pay all attorney fees. Now, what the attorneys have told us is they have submitted their request for payment from the national fund, the lawyer payment fund, and will receive some funding of their expense or their costs out of that. Now, what I understand it to be is somewhere they estimate the amount that they're going to receive from the national set aside for attorney's fees is roughly 5% of the funds that the county will be receiving. And so what they have in the remainder of these agreements shows that 20%, up to 20% will be set aside in a trust account once the funding has been determined that they're going to receive from the national set aside for attorney's fees. Then there will be a settlement out of the set aside that is agreed up to the 20%. If there's any excess, that will be also then returned to the county. So that's really what is a long way of getting around saying we have initially agreed when we signed on to the litigation, agreed to pay the attorney up to 25% of anything that they received or won in awards. And they're going to get roughly 5% from the national fund, National Attorneys Fund set aside, and then roughly 20% will come out of our settlement funds, and that is going to be taken out up front.
Kurt, do you know, was that a contingency fee based on a percent plus cost, or was it a straight 25%?
It was percent plus costs. It was.
So we would be looking at 25% plus. Do we have any idea what those costs are?
What the attorneys have told us, or at least my understanding is that they're getting their costs literally out of the 20% set aside out of the portion that the county is going to be allocated. So I don't have any accurate. We do have a meeting on Friday. Excuse me. On Friday, another meeting with the attorneys on Friday, and I can ask that specific question.
So do you know?
And have that hopefully have that answer for the Tuesday meeting. The other thing that I will say is this. This is the first portion of potentially 3 legs of litigation. This portion of the settlement is a settlement with Johnson & Johnson and some of the distributors. There's 2 additional portions of the lawsuit that will be yet to be finalized. This is not the largest, but is probably the one portion that's in the middle. The other 2 portions with the major manufacturers and additional distributors are yet to be settled. The way the state legislation that was signed into law by the governor allocates the best potential outcome of the settlement will be going directly to the litigating entities in the state of Wisconsin. Now, that litigating entities is 71 of the 72 counties, along with a very few of the other municipalities, cities and villages. But all of the other non-litigating municipalities under the state regulation or state statutes will not be receiving any, whereas in other states, all of the municipalities have to sign on to the settlement agreement. Now, what they have told us is if Marathon County potentially or any of the litigating entities do not sign on, then the portion that is going to be paid out by the settlement is going to be significantly reduced, because there's always the potential that, for example, Marathon County, if they choose not to sign on, could potentially sue again. And because of that, there is going to be a major penalty in the amount of settlement that's actually received.
Kurt, do you know how they derive the allocation formula? Because we're receiving 1.259% of the Wisconsin allocation. We're about, 2.5% of the population in the state? So do we know how that allocation?
Yeah, that allocation was it was based on a national average. So there's a multiple amounts of factors that go into it. Not one being population, but that's not the only thing. That's one factor of it. The other factor, which was, like I said, it was pretty well debated at the national. So the national formula also included the number of opioid prescriptions that were delivered into Marathon County and then disseminated out of Marathon County. So there's multiple things other than just population as to the factor that they utilized in the settlement that actually came out.
Looks like Sauk County must have had a lot of prescriptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So like I said, it was clearly, it wasn't just population. And if one were to look at just the population, one would say that the settlement was unfair. But it clearly stemmed around multiple factors, one of which was population, but again, also it was the amount of opioid prescriptions and pills that were distributed to each of the municipalities.
So Michael, by adopting this, if we adopt the resolution, we are adopting the MOU with the settling parties and the allocation. We are also doing one with the Attorney General, and we are doing, what other documents are we adopting as a result of this?
Those are the 2 documents that we are adopting. There is also the potential for additional settlement documents that would need to be negotiated and approved. So this resolution would authorize that negotiation to occur. But those documents At least I haven't seen them yet. I'm not sure if they're in a draft form, but I'm not aware of that yet.
The 3,543,763.04 over 20 years?
Correct. From what I understand, a major portion of that is going to be paid out up front, but then the remainder portion is going to be paid out over the 20-year period.
And that's set up into an escrow account
Well,
with only eligible activity, or with that eligible activities or approved activities?
It's paid directly to the county. The county has restrictions on the use. The use is for mitigated. It is fairly liberal in the fact that it all has to be tied to mitigation and or prevention and or treatment of anything related to opioid, the opioid abuse or opioid problem in the county. So it is going to be paid to the county direct, and then the county is responsible for reporting the uses of those funds. And again, from the webinars that I've been on, the use is fairly liberal, but it clearly ties directly to opioid use and or abuse.
Other questions or motions?
John, this is Craig.
Go ahead, Craig.
Thank you. When I was reviewing it, didn't it specify that this sum of money had to go into a segregated account? It can't be associated with our general account?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And this resolution creates that account, does it not?
It would authorize us to and require us to create that account for receipt of the funds.
Other questions?
I just have one other comment, Mr. Chair, if I may. One additional consequence if we elected not to participate in the settlement at this point is that we would then be in active litigation against the defendants, so we would have 90-day deadlines to disclose our damages, compute the relief that we're seeking, disclose our experts, things like that. Basically, we would be in the middle of a live civil litigation experience at that point.
All right, what are your wishes?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion that we approve and authorize the chairman to execute the agreement and make that recommendation to the full board.
All right, so there's a motion to approve the resolution. And seconded by.
McEwen, second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the approval of the resolution of acceptance of the opioid settlement will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. It's a great first step of a problem that was unfortunate, that has taken a lot of lives unnecessarily. So thank you for your work on that. Next item is the American Rescue Plan. In the packet, Christie inserted a chart. We're not intending to spend a lot of time on this issue today. We're looking at potentially a special meeting in early January once we have a better understanding of perhaps where we're going and some of our lost revenue. Do you want to just go over that chart?
Okay. In the last meeting, you had homework. You're going to take a look at the sheet and some of the talking points that came out of the sessions in August. And this is kind of your homework. This would be where you want to kind of figure out, these are the buckets that you're looking at. So this is kind of a visual for those of you that kind of like a little bit of math, but more like crossword puzzles and other things like that. This should be able to kind of get that out of your head, and maybe you can scribble on here and get your assignment done by kind of figuring, okay, where would these things fit if these are the buckets it has to go to, and then you know, what are we thinking of for each of these areas? And again, the revenue replacement is that revenue loss of which we've already calculated about 6.8 million for the 2020. So that was your homework assignment, and this is maybe phase 2 of it.
So we can either go through this today or we can do it at that dedicated meeting. What are your preference? We had given you the list of the items that were floated either at the public hearing, submitted to Administrator Leonard, or discussed in public forums at the last meeting. I don't know that we need to go through that today. Perhaps in light of the discussion that we're going to have a little bit later relative to the jail audiovisual enhancement, it might give us a better understanding of how we might apply this going forward. So I would defer, do you want to work on this today, or do you want to, Jim, you're not a member, as much as we value your input. So we are, you know, I think we were intending to float out. So I guess what the direction would be is to take the list that we took last time, look at it. You received 2 things last time. One was the sort of the inventory of potential projects. That doesn't mean that they're eligible or others. And then you saw the criteria, the 1.1, 1.2, the public health had 1.1. You'll see 1.7 come into play later today, or 1.4 or whatever. Take a look at those and see if they fit in there. I think what we're trying to do is get an idea of what might be in each bucket and how we might approach it. In a separate discussion will then be is, do we try to capture as much with the lost revenue, and what do we do with the lost revenue? Do we apply it to the buckets? Do we create a separate process? But I don't think we're in a position to talk about that today, but if you could take a look at those, and maybe what we could do is send out all 3 documents together. So we'll work with administration. We'll send all of those out separately to give you a chance to chew on it for a little bit, and then we can talk about it at the next meeting. Is that acceptable? Jonathan is nodding yes. Allison's nodding yes. Yee, Jennifer, Craig, Kurt, does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, from Jennifer.
Yes, that makes the most from Kurt. I do want to add one thing that I learned from last week, Mr. Chairman, when it's appropriate.
Please, go ahead.
Well, last week I had the National Counties Association Board of Directors meeting, and we had a legislative update. And there is a piece of legislation that is now being drafted that has right now currently in the House 240 some co-authors and signatories on. I don't have the bill number. It's in my folder in the office. Excuse me. That legislation is potentially modifying significantly the use authorizations for some of these funds. One of the in this piece of legislation, 50. Again, don't quote me on the number, but it's in the House, and what it would do is it would be a default number for, in effect, lost revenue, but it even expands the flexibility of those dollars under the lost revenue category. The default would be every municipality receiving ARPA funds regardless. And so I think it has a significant impact, not so much on Marathon County, because I think Marathon County's lost revenue will be above this number, but it has a huge significant impact on potentially smaller recipients. The default is to say that $10 million of the first $10 million of ARPA funds that you receive is going to be considered lost revenue and therefore usable for anything that that municipality is legally authorized to do. The reason I bring it up is because it's significant. If you think about it, one of the things that we had thought about in one of the programs that we had thought about potentially looking at was broadband expansion and expanding and partnering with local municipalities. Well, if this piece of legislation does get passed, it would effectively say that if the town of Marathon, for example, received less than $10 million of ARPA funding, all of its funding would be considered lost revenue, regardless of what their lost revenue calculation is. And that means that they could use effectively all of it for roads, for anything that that local unit of government could do. And so now your other municipalities, I think the only two municipalities in Marathon County that received more than 10 million would be the city of Wausau and would be Marathon County. So everybody else's ARPA dollars, if this piece of legislation was passed, would effectively allow them to use it for anything that they deem appropriate under that legislation. So I wanted the committee to be aware of that. I don't know that it changes our discussions. It just may put a different light on what we might be able to or might be able to partner with as far as other municipalities. So I wanted to provide that context to the committee.
Thank you for that update.
Chairman Robinson, the law that, the bill that Supervisor Gibbs is talking about is HB 5735, State, Local, Tribal, and Territorial Fiscal Recovery Infrastructure Disaster Relief Flexibility Act. So if you're looking for it, again, it's HB 5735, and they call it the Flexibility Act. And that is true. It would give you the flat dollar amount of 10 million. And again, looking at the allocations for Marathon County itself, he is correct. I believe it's only Wausau at 15,757,000 and Marathon County itself at 26.3. So if you are looking at tracking that, I believe that's the name and the number of that bill.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? If not, we will send out the information we promised, and we'll set up that meeting. All right, we will now go on to a discussion and possible action, repeal and creation of the new Marathon County Procurement Code. Mike and Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the committee recalls this issue was before you earlier this year. This is a project that began in Scott's hands, and he had provided several revisions or proposed revisions for your review. At that time, the consensus of the committee was that in addition to those revisions, it would be a good time to consider an entire overhaul of the code so that it was not only revised as far as the thresholds, but in a format that was potentially more workable for the county. So included in your packet is a draft of a recreated procurement code. It does include those revisions that were previously presented, but it also overhauls the structure. Prior to having this draft before you, I did solicit input from the department heads and agency heads in Marathon County. That input is included in the draft as well. Much of the content is unchanged. I can note for you the major points and revisions. The overall biggest change that you'll note is just the formatting and I guess the flow, with lack of a better word. The goal there was just to make the code more readable and functional and easier for county employees to use and train on. Looking at the actual thresholds, which is section 3.05 of the new revised code. These are the revisions that were previously discussed, along with some additional proposed revisions. The proposed revisions would change what the current thresholds are. Specifically, right now we have a $10,000 threshold. Under that threshold, purchases are discretionary in nature, so those purchases are made at the discretion of the purchasing agent. There's no specific type of competition required. The proposal would be to raise that threshold to $25,000. I think that's completely a policy decision for you. It's within the law to do that. It just would provide a larger discretionary area for purchasing agents. For the threshold between 25,000 and 80,000, that would fall into the small purchases threshold. There was a discussion about this at the last time this issue was reviewed before the committee, and the idea behind raising the small purchasing threshold is to allow the competition that is required of small purchases, namely the solicitation of 3 or more quotations. The expansion of that threshold is consistent with the expansion in other areas. The federal threshold is actually $250,000 for small purchases, so we're below that still. This code would also give our intergovernmental agencies, such as, for instance, the airport board, the discretion to raise the airport's small purchases threshold up to the federal small purchasing maximum of $250,000. The requirements of bidding and RFPs are the same. They're just laid out in a manner that I'm hoping is more readable and usable. You might note, if you look at our current code compared to this one, is that there was a large definition section in the current code that's been removed. The reason for that is many of those definitions didn't appear anywhere else in the procurement code, the defined terms anyways, and instead of using a separate section, the terms that needed to be defined are just defined actually in the text. Some other things to note, there's some added verbiage about what to do in the case of tied bids. We didn't have a function for that, so we now have specified that. Thank you, Commissioner Griesbach, for that idea. There's specific guidance for how to handle single bids in response to a request for proposals or bidding. And there's also specific language about the types of contracts that the county allows that's similar to previous language that we've had. We did add, and this is a revision consistent with last time, a revision about how to dispose of used or surplus property. We've never addressed that previously. This code would allow purchasing agents to handle that, but also would prohibit county officers and employees from being involved in the purchase of used or surplus property. There is an exception to that that's built in here, which would be if the disposal of the property would be conducted by an independent third-party bidding entity, which with the officer or employee has no relationship or interest or control. So the idea there is to allow it in the rare case where an employee could be completely divorced from the process. Again, that would be a policy question, I think, for this committee and for the board as to whether we want to add that in. And so I think those are the major points I wanted to highlight. There's a lot there, but much of it is simply reformatting from the previous or the current procurement code. I also included in your packet a flow chart that I devised to kind of assist with potentially training. I think in talking with Administrator Leonard, if a new procurement code is passed, one of the key pieces is going to be ensuring that there's proper training on the procurement code, how procurements occur, and ensuring that there is oversight for the decisions that are made. So part of that is just giving some basic guidance on how this works, and then potentially drafting a more thorough policy that can be used at employee onboarding and things like that. So happy to answer any questions or anything else.
And packet 2 has the correct flow chart. I believe that we adjusted, so take a look in the one designated as packet 2 and you'll see the flow chart there.
So I have a question that I posed to Mike and Lance beforehand, is that we lay a lot of responsibility for the implementation of this, a successful implementation on the administrator and/or his designees. And we're expanding the authority of purchasing agents from 10 to 25, and then with a non-bidding, but quotes for up to 80,000. How will we ensure integrity of the process so that we don't, what sort of protections will we put into place, and training will we provide to ensure compliance of it and avoid problems in the future?
This is Administrator Leonard. I think that's a great question, and Mike hit the first part, which is, it has been my experience that one of the primary issues we had with adherence to our old code was the fact that the old code was somewhat incomprehensible at times when you were reading it. It also, as you referenced, put a lot of oversight responsibility relative to the administrator that quite honestly wasn't being adhered to, as far as I can tell, for the last decade. So I think the first part of that process is what we're doing today, which is bringing before you a code that is laid out in a logical format for easy training, and a credit to Mike for putting together that flow chart. I think walking people through in terms of what type of process is necessary based on the specific procurement we're going to utilize is going to be vitally important. I think that those training tools are important. In terms of oversight, I think one other piece of information that, or a topic I should say, that you're well versed in here that is going to help us in that regard, and that is our implementation of a comprehensive ERP system that's going to be a more effective mechanism by which we can track overall purchases. But it's going to be an incremental approach to this, an approach that first and foremost, we need to train on this revised process. I think, again, to Mike's credit, reaching out to department heads to see how is the current code not working effectively. We've heard from, certainly from the airport board, we've heard from North Central Healthcare, we've heard from Commissioner Griesbach that there were a lot of barriers in our current code that really weren't doing what the code is meant to do, which is the code is meant to enhance transparency with respect to purchases and to ensure that Marathon County taxpayers get the greatest value for the funds that they expend. And there were certain aspects of the code that weren't helping us in either regard. So I think to your specific question, first and foremost is going to be training, but then also the oversight piece is going to be periodic reviews through the finance department to make sure that the procurements we're utilizing, the methodologies that we're utilizing, are the appropriate ones for the purchases that we're making.
And just, I'm super excited because Administrator Leonard stated that we have this flow chart. We're going to have our first meeting on procurement tomorrow, and what they're doing is asking us what measures we have in place to do our work. And so all of these little points, I'm going to be so excited to, at least, even if you don't approve it today, I'm going to send this to our consultants, because it's going to really help us try to drive the correct and proper way of doing procurement. So I just want to tell you, it's pretty helpful to us.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess one question, and I don't know that we know the answer to this yet. Is there limitations that we can put on or include with the new ERP system that says before we pay out a invoice of 25,000 or more, that we have, adherence to the procurement code? So I'm wondering if there's a way to set some guidelines or some tests that show, yep, look, we went out and got 3 bids. Here's the 3 bids that we received on this purchase.
We'll ask that question again. We'll be meeting our first time on procurement tomorrow. And we will give them at least this flow chart. But we are really talking even about budget transfers and all of those things. And from what we understand in our limited discussion so far, that there are a lot of, starting with actually requisition, not even at the procurement purchase order point, there are built-in stops or questions that get asked similar to this flow chart. So I can't guarantee you that there are, but we believe that it will be a much more transparent and accountable than we have currently.
Supervisor Fisher?
And thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question and then an observation. The quick question first is there a, in regards to purchasing, does each department have a select group of individuals that are eligible to act as purchasing agents, or is there a more centralized unit?
Currently, each individual department has an identified purchasing agent. In some departments, for example, within the highway department, they have an individual other than Jim that really leads that effort. But in other departments, in the absence of a specific purchasing agent, it is the department head that is responsible.
Excellent. So having that role to the department head would, with oversight from the finance team, I think would help keep pretty good controls on this process. Secondarily, the observation was within the top of the flow chart, notice that it's noted right there that purchases cannot be artificially divided so that each portion is under 25,000. So you're looking at an aggregate purchase of whatever that good or service becomes. So that's, I was appreciative to see that, to make sure we didn't have any, slicing and dicing to get under the 25,000 initial threshold. And, so I think that would be very beneficial to keep, obviously in the code. Thank you.
Any other questions? First of all, I neglected. I want to thank Mike and Dan in particular for their work on streamlining this archaic process and trying to bring it into the modern ages. And much like we're doing with the ERP process, we're trying to improve our processes and procedures and support systems to make us more efficient. And so thank you for all of your work on this, both of you, and it's very much appreciated, and I think will help us go a long way in making improvements. But are there any other questions that we have for Mike? Are you in a position where you feel comfortable in acting on this today? It's a significant document. I thought it was ready for prime time. I think we've talked about the threshold issue before. I think my concern is that we need to have a culture that creates that accountability and tracking. And I think based on the discussion of training and Administrator Leonard's comments, I think we'll get there. So that addresses the big concern that I have with it. Other concerns, questions, or motions?
I guess one other question, Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Go ahead.
And it's not related to the procurement code and the change in the updating of that in particular, but I know in multiple entities, and they have a single purchasing agent. Is that something that this county has looked at, is willing to look at, has looked at, and at least understood the advantages and the disadvantages of that?
This is Administrator Leonard. I can say I've had conversations with not only, certainly with Christie, we're talking about the potential for that, but one of the models that I've searched out and I've had some conversations with the city of Wausau around is the model that's used in Sheboygan County and the partnership they have with the city of Sheboygan. They implemented a shared purchasing department between each of those two entities, and they are comparable in size to certainly Marathon County. And I think that's an avenue through which we can move. In my mind, this is an iterative process. We don't want to allow perfection to be the enemy of good. We needed to update our procurement code. It, as was referenced before, it was rather archaic. But to your point, Chair Gibbs, I think there's merit in continuing the evolution of how we perform our work. It has been my experience that procurement is more complex, perhaps, than it was a number of years ago with the various purchasing consortiums, the amount of goods and services that we're having to procure for the various work that we're doing. And I think there is the opportunity, as you pointed out, to centralize some of that functionality because it's also very complex. It's not simply our Marathon County code that is that we have to comply with. There's also state statute and federal statutes that apply based on the specific nature of the program that you're dealing with. And I know North Central and Dan have they've done a lot of work there to look at procurement. I think there's opportunities, whether or not we as Marathon County exclusively develop a purchasing department. I think there's certainly merit in continuing conversations with entities that we work closely with to see if that's a shared possibility, again, based on that Sheboygan County approach, which has been highlighted in quite a number of communications that I've seen as a really innovative and efficient way to address that need. So the short answer to your question is yes, I think there's merit in looking at that.
Right. Any other questions?
And I didn't want to insinuate that I wasn't thankful for the upgrade, and I really am. I do also want to express my sincere thank you to Michael and to Dan and all the staff that worked on the upgrade, because I think it was long overdue. There was parts of the code that we weren't following, and this puts us into at least the 21st century as far as our procurement. So I just think that might be potentially the next step, or at least evaluate that potential. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we approve and forward to the full board for its consideration the new procurement code as presented.
Is there a second?
Fisher to second.
Moved by Gibbs, seconded by Fisher. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And again, thank you for your work, and thank the others that are not present here today. And Jim, you get to go. All right, next is the resolution to amend the 2021 KIP for courtroom and jail audiovisual enhancements. Chad. We lost Craig.
Thank you for having me here this afternoon. I'm here to talk to you about a project that we've been working on for several months, maybe a little bit longer. If you recall, there was a time when we had a group of people working together on criminal justice system budgeting and looking for opportunities.
Oh,
now it is. I'll start over again. There was a time when we were working on criminal justice system budgeting and looking for opportunities in order to make ourselves more efficient. throughout the COVID pandemic, what we've realized is that there's real opportunity for us to be enhancing our video court opportunities. What we've been doing is using the Zoom platform and a really crude means of doing that, where we have cameras like the one that's sitting here right now on the podium looking at me, and laptops that are set up in courtrooms. And what we're finding is that the audio that provides is inadequate. Although we're meeting the needs of some of the video technology, the audio just simply doesn't do it. The courtrooms in Marathon County last week, I believe, were all upgraded to a new system called a DAR. And a DAR is a piece of equipment that allows for remote court transcription of what's taking place in the courtroom. So as we look to a new system, we need to find a system that not only handles the video and the audio, but will also handle the DAR opportunity, because that means that court reporters don't have to show up here at the courthouse anymore. They'll be able to do all of their work remotely, and court reporters can be shared across the state, across the county, in order to accomplish what needs to be done for the courts. We also have a need when it comes to transporting our inmates. The way it works today is when we need an inmate to come here from one of the prisons, another county, and sometimes even within our own facility, we actually have to transport that inmate to the courtroom. There is considerable cost in doing that, the cost of driving from prisons and other counties, the cost of housing them here, and then the risk that we take every time that we're putting those miles on cold, snowy days, or as we know, things just happen on the highway, so there's an inherent risk there as well. We are looking at a system that will allow us to handle all non-evidentiary court hearings remotely, whether they be in a state prison, another county, a mental health institution. It will be able to handle all of that. So the team that worked on this is Jerry Klein from CCIT, who's obviously our technical expertise. The interim clerk of courts, Kelly Schremp, and Judge Huber has helped lead the project. You will see in your packet that in order to ensure that we are all on the same page and in agreement of how we're going to handle court in the future, once the system is in place, we actually signed a charter where the judges, the sheriff, and the clerk of courts all agree that as often as possible, and I would go as far as to say, in all non-evidentiary hearings, we will utilize video court technology to avoid all of those other costly trips and services that Marathon County is currently paying for. Now, the cost of doing this isn't cheap, and that's because we're not doing Zoom technology. We're using technology that, although it may be powered by a platform like Zoom, it uses the audio systems and so forth to integrate everything. I know that when we reported out on this to the Public Safety Committee, there was some criticism about, well, why couldn't you just use, not from the committee and not from the board, but I saw it in the public through the media that this is a high price tag. Well, the reason there's a high price tag is because it supports so many other systems. We need to outfit 8 different branches, all 6 of our circuit court branches, and 2 hearing rooms. In addition to that, we need to do a modification in the jail, a small construction project, to give us 3 courtrooms, if you will, holding areas for inmates to be, so that they can interact with the courts on site here and we can hold multiple hearings at a time. What we believe the cost to be for each courtroom is roughly $70,000. Give or take, depending upon which courtroom it is, whether it's a hearing room or one of the larger rooms. And then we have about $13,000, if I recall correctly, in upgrades to the jail. And then contingency, because we know that there's cabling that needs to be redone in some of these areas. So we have a contingency of 10% of the equipment and furnishings project for a grand total of just shy of $630,000 in order to do this project. What we are asking is that American Rescue Plan Act funds be utilized in order to do this. We've done some research. I know that the administrator has done some research. Finance director has done some research, and we believe that this project would be applied or could be applied to that source of funding. So this is a CIP project, but we are not seeking CIP funds per se. guess at this point, I turn over to Jerry or Lance if there's anything I missed. I know you've been very involved in the project as well.
I just want to add that the main reason that, as Chad talked about, is improving audio. What they're using right now is a laptop or sometimes two laptops, laptop mics, and the mic that's on that little camera in front of Chad there. Chad tapped that camera, the little USB camera. There's a little mic on that thing. Both of that and the laptop mics are really designed to capture noise in about 3 or 4 foot area just in front of it. And so all of these solutions are fairly expensive because they incorporate 8 or 9 microphones, and they have sound cancellation so that there's not the echo that you guys have heard many times, Lance has heard many times, is the echo canceling that you have with mics looping back into the PA systems. That's the key thing that we're trying to get out of this.
This is Administrator Leonard. I just want to add a couple other details. I think Chad did a great job giving that overview. The reason that I think this is from my perspective, I think it's a solid use of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars is not only do I think it's a great thing for all the reasons Chad laid out, but if you've kind of seen in the media or certainly heard from our local judges, we have had a significant impact on court operations as a result of the pandemic. Teresa Whetstone has spoken eloquently about that. District Attorney Whetstone has spoken eloquently about that in terms of the backlog, a quote-unquote backlog of cases. It's going to take a concerted effort on behalf of all of our criminal justice stakeholders to address that backlog, and it's going to take time. And the more efficient we can be in terms of moving cases through the system as promptly as possible within the scope of the important work we have, which is again to do justice within the justice system, but limiting our need to transport unnecessarily transport inmates not only within our existing 4 walls, but not even take them from one facility to our facility, I think is money well spent. Similarly, the primary purpose of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars is to address the impacts of the pandemic and mitigate future pandemic effects. You heard, if you watched the public safety meeting recently, Chad talked about a recent outbreak of COVID within the jail. And make no mistake, the pandemic is still here. So that to the extent we can keep individuals from moving unnecessarily, whether that's 2 law enforcement officers driving to Dodge Correctional to pick someone up, transport them here, and then transport them back, I think is money well spent. Similarly, keeping individuals within our institution, within the jail, and allowing them to remotely appear, money well spent because you're limiting potential exposure. So I think this is a really sound project. I will say Marathon County is not unique in its pursuit of these projects. Many other counties either have utilized already their routes to recovery dollars to implement this sort of work, or they are planning to utilize ARPA dollars to pursue this sort of work. So the reason it's before you today, one of the reasons it's before you promptly is we understand there may be inflationary costs. Chad referenced the contingency piece already. We do want to move forward with this relatively promptly to not only get the project done so we can start to see some of those benefits, but be also because we recognize it's going to take some time to get this done. But I do think, Chad started with this, the idea that the charter was signed. One of the positive outcomes of system budgeting is, again, to have the conversation and get on the same page. There were a lot of other counties that were a lot further ahead than we were with respect to virtual appearances. So we needed to have a lot of conversations recently that many other counties have had well in advance. I mean, if you watch the news, the nightly news, if you would have watched the nightly news 2 years ago, for a lot of other counties, you would see an initial appearance and one of the people would be appearing on a television we really hadn't done much of that until the pandemic. So I think this is it's a much needed project.
Just listening through the presentation, and thank you very much for the added detail. This definitely seems like a project that we should, that I would support and would like to move forward with. Just in the idea that, you know, at this point, we need to get on board with where we are when we talk about things like, you know, future need for these types of services. Just a very quick question. Do we have a general idea of what the soft savings would be by moving forward with a project like this? Did we kind of total up, you know, how much those transportation trips cost, you know, roughly for a year? Did we do that analysis at all?
What we know historically about our writs, and those are the ones where we're bringing people back, on average, we're spending about $79,000 a year just on transporting writs. So they mirror very closely, or had mirrored at one time, our mental health transports we were doing with Winnebago. And a lot of that's been remedied through some work with North Central Healthcare, so that's been a very positive thing. But it is costly, and it is very common.
Thank you.
And I do want to clarify, this isn't going to get rid of all transports, because like Chad said, there are a lot of things where we do need to, the statutes are set up in a way where sometimes it's required to have people personally appear, but I think the commitment that our team from the courts, the clerk of court, the sheriff's office, is to, as much as we can, utilize these virtual appearances.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to express my support for this. I know that the chief deputy and I had discussions about this when I first came on as the county board supervisor, and I know that in the beginning, initially the judges were not very supportive of it, but the fact that the judges are indeed supportive of this as well too. I definitely think this is going to be an effective and a very efficient a way of saving a future and long time costs as well. So I would be very supportive of this.
Any other questions or motions?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question. I do 100% support the project and moving forward. The question becomes more on the operational side and implementation side, and that is, I know via sitting on the CCIT board, capacity is an issue. And so I would, this question is going to be targeted to Mr. Klein and or individual, or maybe even Chad. Is this going to be subcontracted out, or is what portion of CCIT's do we have CCIT's capacity to implement this, or have we contracted that?
Kurt, this is Jerry. This will be mainly done by contractors. So we'll be using a contractor to do the cabling that's in the walls. Chad mentioned earlier that that's a component of this. There's a bunch of new wiring that needs to be done. And then we'll be likely purchasing it, although I haven't done it yet, likely purchasing it from one of the companies that are on state contract for installing this equipment. And they would be doing a significant part of it. The city county IT component of it is not huge. It's not non-existent, but it's not huge. So we'll be having a project manager work on it, and there will be some networking issues that need to get done as well. In the scheme of the projects that you've seen.
Thank you for that.
Yep, okay, thanks.
Right, this issue has been before the Public Safety Committee. They have endorsed it, recommended it to us. What are your wishes?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to approve and forward to the full board an amendment of the 2021 CIP project to utilize the funds from the ARPA funds.
Is there a
Pay for
second?
it.
Second by Fisher. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. All right, next, resolution to amend the 2021 KIP for the Big O Plain Road Project.
I messed this up because Jamie's here and she caught it. I put 2020 CIP has a big old plain road project. 2020 CIP has a big old plain electrical upgrade. So I'm like, what the heck do you need more money for that road for? Jamie, you got it in 2 years. She needs it for the electrical upgrade. So packet number 2 has a quickly written resolution that the CIP sheets are correct, but the resolution is to take the 2020 CIP big O plain electrical upgrade, and that needs more money. So she is going to take the 2021 horse barn money of $35,000, and we're going to take that and give that to the big O plain electrical upgrade. So the packet number 2 and the agenda is.
Can I stop you there? Mike, can we do this today?
Yeah, I amended the agenda.
In light of how we've noticed
I amended the agenda to have the correct, the correct agenda item on.
All right, then go ahead. All right. Sorry, I'm just,
No, Jamie saved the day because she said, that's great, but it's not the right project. So I'm like, oh, I can still amend the agenda with an hour left. So it's all posted and everything's good. So the packet number 2 has the, and that agenda, I can show you the agenda too, just so you have that. As you can see, the agenda, the amended agenda was posted with the big O plain electrical upgrade, so.
okay.
Yep. And so with that, we are just asking for the sheets are the same. So it's actually going to be the, can't see it very well, but instead of being the big O plain road, it is the electrical upgrade, which is there, which you've got in 2020. And what we're going to do is we just want to take this 2021 horse barn project, which is on here somewhere, and use that money to get her electrical upgrade done at the big O plain. Second from the bottom. Here you go, right? Big O plain horse barn. They go out to the big O plain after it's all done because she's going to have all kinds of great stuff. So that's kind of my mix up, and there's a lot of projects, but that's the agenda got amended, and that's what we're really going to do. So take the horse barn money, $35,000, and we're going to put it into the electrical upgrade. It's just that they're in 2 different CIP years, and we're going to get everything done.
Are there any questions of Christie or Jamie?
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
The 35,000 for the horse barn project, was that then not done this year, Jamie? And if not, is it going to be brought back as a project moving forward? Or was that 35 excess that was not needed? Just a little clarification on the 35,000 from the horse barn, because that is a 2021 project, which would be almost, I thought would have been done by now.
Correct. When we actually went out to get final quotes for the horse barn project, because of lumber prices and everything going way up, our price came back double. So we chose not to do that project this year. We're going to reprioritize that. It may come back in the future, or we may look at doing something different within the park. So that's why it's not being used for 2021, is we didn't have enough funds to complete it, and we think we might reprioritize. But also because of the cost of materials, our electric upgrade came in higher than what we had budgeted and expected, with some additional changes that we had to make. And so that's where we're asking for that $35,000 to be transferred to finish the electrical upgrade, and then we'll reprioritize the building.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right. If not, what are your wishes? Moved by Supervisor Leahy, seconded by Supervisor Fisher. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of amending the 2021 KIP for the 2020 KIP Big Plain project, say that fast twice. Any question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. All right. We have no policies, issues, discussion, and committee determination. So the next meeting is the 11th. We will be looking at, after consulting with administration, a date for a special ARPA meeting. And we'll let you know. We will send out that information. Anything else? Any other announcements?
On the packet number 2, this is your tentative calendar. The rules say the Tuesday of the second Thursday of the month is the date that the Finance Committee meets, and then you determine the fourth Tuesday of the month will be your educational meeting. So I believe the yellow ones will be the meetings. The problem in October, there's 2 little pink boxes. Because you have to publish the budget for 15 days, no earlier than 15 days prior to the actual budget hearing on November 3rd, it would mean you would meet the day before the actual, it needs to be in the newspaper, so that's not going to give us enough time to notify them. They need about at least 24 hours. So I put a little pink October 17th date, so if you need another meeting, I would say that would be your very last day, because I would need to have it to the newspaper that afternoon to guarantee publication by October 19th. So that's the only thing in there that's got pink for that reason. But this right now is what your looks like. The yellows are your meeting dates. Pink should be when an agenda item should be in, and the blue days are the dates that the agendas would be posted at this time. So you can take a look at that, and I will send it out. Supervisor Robinson, if you determine that January date, then I would just send this out as a finalized copy to everyone.
I think Craig's left us, so I think we're going to want to get his input, so we'll.
Yeah, but this is for you guys. It's in packet 2, and this is what it looks like at this time.
All right, does this reflect when we meet with Portage County and the airport?
No.
So we'll understand that through April, this is probably pretty good. We'll have to revisit it in April when we've got a new committee to make sure that the schedule aligns with people's schedules. So why don't you assume that this is what we'll do between now and April, and after April, we'll base it on who's on here and if the rules committee changes come into play. So thank you for preparing that. Anything else? If not, a motion to adjourn is in order. Supervisor Leahy had her hand up. Seconded by Supervisor Fisher. All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
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 Opposed, no. Thank you all. We will see you next week.